Welcome back to the channel, and today I wanted to give you all an update on the player XP slider set I have been working on. We are going to cover some of the interesting things I have found when trialing out the sliders, as well as some of the tests I ran to see if it was even feasible to accomplish this. With that being said, I really appreciate you all tuning in today, and if you find this video informative, consider dropping a like and a subscription below. It helps out the channel a ton and it's completely free to you. So let's get into it. So my goal was to give you all a slider set for XP gaming players that made progression a little bit more realistic. I've been asked a few times on the channel to give some insight on this, so that is what I set out to do. While I did set out to accomplish the original goal of the video, I was caught off guard by a few things I consider very eye-opening. So after a few attempts to provide a slider set, I figured I would start tracking some data, and what I did was found two players on the same team and see how they progress at different slider percentages. Those players were Daniel Clark and Stanley Fox of the ECU Pirates. Both have normal dev traits and are 62 overall freshmen. I did mainly force Daniel Clark to be wide receiver 1, as I will also want to see how the stats affected the player's development. I try to keep everything pretty much similar, to reduce all the variables in the testing. So these are my results. In the testing, I ran 4 tests and I was able to see how the players progressed when reducing the sliders by 20% each time. Here's the tabulated data I got. As you can see, it is not really consistent for Clark. As we reduce the XP percentage, overall goes up in some cases. Stats played a big part in test 4, as he had 9 touchdowns, almost double of test 3. Still surprising he was able to gain so much more skill points, even though we reduced the slider set by 60% between test 1 and test 4. Next, we look at Fox, and he stayed relatively the same on all 4 tests, which is also very strange since we reduced the sliders. Then he should either increase the overall or decrease the overall depending on how the game considers the directionality of the slider. EA sometimes has an issue with making sliders work in the opposite way you would think. So coming off that assumption that the sliders aren't really affecting overall development, I tried to figure out why. And to much my dismay, I found the reason. In the game, the sliders affect game XP. So when a player plays a game, the XP is affected by the slider. This is not where much development happens in College Football 25. Most of it takes place in the offseason training the players do. And thus, this is why I'm making this video and not a slider set video for you all. When you change the sliders, it does not affect the offseason development, and therefore you cannot change the true rate of how players develop to your liking. I took a couple examples right here. I'll show you. I took the before the season and at the end of the season. So before off-season progression happens, and you can really see how they stayed the same overall. It was independent of how much stats they got. Obviously, you got a little bit more development from getting better stats, but he still never increased in overall at all. He did increase some more than other seasons, but he never increased a full overall point when he had better stats. So after I ran the original 4 tests, I thought maybe I was going about it the wrong way. So I went and took a different team. I took Kentucky in this instance, so I wasn't the coach of the team. The players weren't in the starting lineup, so they didn't get any stats. They were stat free, and I just kind of compared the two. You can see I did 200%, 150%, and 50% on the XP slider, specifically for wide receivers. You can see Stanley Cox went from 66 overall to 68 to 70, which is kind of the inverse of what I would think. When you reduce the slider XP, I assume that you would accrue less slider XP rather than more. But in this case, it looks like it's not that way. But when you look at Daniel Clark's, it went 75, 76, 75. So he did not change at all. And this is kind of supporting the theory that in-season XP doesn't really change. It still doesn't explain exactly why Stanley Cox had different overall percentages or different overall amounts at the end of the start of the next season after training. I'm not really sure, and that was kind of an outlier in this scenario, and I'll have to do more testing to finalize that. But that has kind of been my conclusion, is that in-season training or in-season XP really isn't affecting your player. You get possibly 1 XP over the full season. It's the out-of-season progression that really affects your player the most. So after all this research and the test I ran, this really brings up more questions than it does answers for me. Like, if this was intentional, if it was, then why was it? And if it wasn't, will we get a fix soon? I'm not really certain why this is the case, but it is currently that we have to deal with. I do feel as though the development was better before the patch, so maybe this was an unintended consequence of the update, and they will have another update out sooner or later to fix this. But currently, there is really no way to slow down progression for players or increase it to your liking. So with that, I just want to apologize that I can't provide the slider set today. I would have hoped to. It sucks for the community and especially those that like to align their settings to their liking. But I hope this isn't a choice and it was unintended and we can get it fixed. And one last time, I really appreciate y'all being here for this one. And if you found this insightful or hope EA changes their mind, the best way to do that is to get this video in front of more eyes by liking the video. Subtle plug, I know. But I would be extremely grateful if you all would sub as well. It helps out the channel a ton and it's completely free to support us as we are nearing in on 500 subscribers. I hope you all enjoyed and I will see you in the next one.